Mention the name Doug Collins to most people and you're guaranteed a strong reaction. They either love him or hate him. Born to a working-class family in Britain, he immigrated to this country in 1952. In World War II, he fought in the British Army and was captured and escaped from 10 prison camps. Awarded a military medal, he later wrote a book, POW, about his experiences.
That's a long, with ancient history, isn't it? But I mean, I fought in the Battle of France, as they called it, in 1940. I was a sergeant in the British Army. I believe I was the youngest sergeant in the British Army, but anyway. We were doing the rearguard action at Dunkirk. I didn't know it was the rearguard action, or I'd have made sure maybe I was a bit nearer to the beach, you know. And so I was captured there, and I suppose that, I'm not really joking about that, that was a beginning for me in international affairs. So I refer facetiously to the fact that I earned my doctorate in international affairs at the University of Dunkirk.
And you were captured?
Yes, I was captured, yeah.
By the Germans?
By the Germans, yes, and I landed up in Stalag 8B in Lower Silesia and escaped after 4 attempts getting across Czechoslovakia to Hungary, and eventually was airlifted out of Romania, went back into the British Army and was in the final campaign in Northwest Europe. I was a gung-ho soldier in those days. I was young.
You seem like such a sweet guy, Doug. How did you get such a bad reputation?
Because there are so many loonies in the world. I'm coming to the conclusion that I'm the only sane man left. But there may be 1 or 2 others, like Pat Burns, you know.
I often wondered why you stayed on the West Coast where there are so many loonies. I mean, don't you think you'd be happier on the East Coast?
No, I like loony land, as a matter of fact, because there's more to write about. One doesn't want too sane a society, or there's no point in being a columnist. I mean, what would I do but for the loonies, you know? I grew up with certain values. I mean, one did not. I mean, I was a little terror as a kid. You know, if my parents were alive, they could tell you about me. But at least I didn't get into the hands of the police or anything like that, but I was always up to some sort of mischief. And, but at the same time, one didn't rob old ladies of their handbags. One didn't go in for all the horrors that are now apparent in our society, not just here, but all over the Western world, I think. And so it's those things, I think, that I object to.
Do you ever wish you'd been a little less vitriolic, a little less opinionated?
No. No, I mean, you know, there are some people in the media who should be bank clerks, or maybe bank managers, but I'm not one of them. You know, I want to go to the point and state it clearly. There aren't many of us left who do that.
Does anything make you emotional, make you cry, make you sad?
Yeah, I go to funerals and cry, and I go to movies sometimes and cry. I mean, a man shouldn't admit that, at least in the milieu in which I grew up. A man never admitted that he cried, but I remember that Winston Churchill frequently cried. He was very emotional. And so if I go to a funeral, a friend's funeral or something like that, or an acquaintance, you know, or if I go to a movie that's particularly moving, the old tears will trickle out of the scaly eyes, you know. But I pretend that I'm wiping my nose or something.
I guess you heard about Bob Quintrell.
Yes, yes, I was very sorry to hear about Bob going, yeah, because I worked with him for 9 or 10 years. Good fellow. He was actually the best host, in my opinion, that the CBC ever had.
How would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as a guy who laid it on the line and didn't care really where the chips fell. I would also like to be remembered as a fairly honest man. Diogenes couldn't find one, but I think that there are some around.
Roger Schiffer's place in Vancouver folklore is assured. During the mid-60s, he was one of the main cogs in the bountiful Vancouver music scene. He ran the Retinal Circus at the corner of Davie and Burrard. During the Summer of Love, 1967, Roger Schiffer could be found organizing, promoting, volunteering, and in general, leading his special community. A great deal of his time seemed to be spent fighting Mayor Tom Campbell. Roger's famous father, photographer Schiffer, wanted him to follow in his footsteps or perhaps be a lawyer. Well, Roger would have none of that stuff. He was going to be the world's least paid, best known rock promoter, and it was all going to happen within the walls of the Retinal Circus.
What I remember about the Retinal Circus and all that was your office, which was this crammed hole in the wall, filled with papers.
Yes.
Who did you book into the Retinal Circus locally, local acts?
was United Empire Loyalists and My and Old Ring and Mother Tucker's Yellow Duck and Tom Northcott and the trio and the Collectors, you know, now then we're Chilliwack, and Seeds of Time, Fast Flying Vestibule. Almost all of the original music that was developed in Vancouver in the late 60s got its first showcase at the Retinal Circus.
You felt that was important?
That was very important. We came out of years of copying chart records or R&B music, and that's all that existed. And we told people that we would prefer that they played horrible music if it was original than that they gave us a beautiful copy of something that somebody else had written.
Outside of the building, there was a war raging between Tom Campbell and the local governments and the hippie establishment.
This was right after the Summer of Love, and people came to Vancouver just as much as they did to San Francisco as a mecca to find whatever it is they thought they'd find in life. And the city thought that it would be terribly bad for business. Parents were very uptight about their runaway kids, so they didn't know where they were staying. Kids were crossing the country without any ID, without any money, and coming here and ending up sleeping in the streets or in 20 in a room somewhere. And the police harassed anybody who looked the least bit odd.
You and Stan Persky formed a city government at one time to offset Tom Terrific and his guys up in City Hall. How did that come about?
We were trying to get welfare to give the kids money, to give people money for food. We wanted the Bay to quit harassing kids. We wanted the downtown businessmen to provide money for a soup kitchen. And when we spoke to them one-on-one, they just really didn't want to listen to us. So we decided to invent a fictitious level of government and deal government to government. So we became the city government. And Stan Persky was the mayor, and I was the Minister of Culture. And we had a Minister of Propaganda and a Minister of Warfare. Those were days when we never envisioned trusting anybody over 30.
True.
And I think the world's changed a lot because of who we were.
And what was the legacy that we handed off?
About feelings and sharing, being vulnerable to some degree, a lot more openness, and that love might change the world.
It's nice to see him again. Roger's back in the music business with a publishing company called, naturally enough, Retinal Circus.
And Doug continues to write his very controversial column for the North Shore News.